Hi everybody, so before we get started I just wanted to say that I'm making this video to promote my own comic that we have coming out and that we're doing a Kickstarter for, but we'll talk about all that after. Let's get to the point of this video. If you know me or have read any 3 of my tweets, then you know that I am a massive comic book fan, and surprise surprise, I'm a massive horror fan too. So when horror stories are told in comic book form, it's basically like all my dreams have come true. I've read pretty much every readily available horror comic series there is, and I've picked a few of my favorites in no particular order, except number 1. That one, number 1 is right where it's supposed to be. Number 5, From Hell by Alan Moore with art by Eddie Campbell. From arguably the most influential comic book writer of all time comes one of the most lauded comic books of all time. From Hell, which ran for 10 issues between 1989 and 1996, tells the story of Jack the Ripper, or at least Alan Moore's opinions on what the true story behind Jack the Ripper could have been. Moore and Campbell meticulously researched everything surrounding the story of Jack the Ripper, eventually landing on journalist Stephen Knight's theory as a good jumping-off point for their book. Moore and Campbell recreate the era of late 1800s London so vividly and accurately, and the most horrifying details in the comic are even more horrifying because they actually happened. Moore has done other work in horror, most notably completely revamping the character Swamp Thing entirely, but From Hell easily stands out as his best story in the genre. It's a take on a real-life historical mystery that will envelop you in the truth of it all and make you really think about the horrors going on in London at the time, and provide a glimpse into the actual impact the murders had. 4. Gideon Falls, Jeff Lemire with art by Andrea Sorrentino. Jeff Lemire is amongst the most prolific comic book writers of all time. He's written for Marvel, DC, Vertigo, Valiant, and Gideon Falls' publisher, Image Comics. A whole lot of Lemire's work comes right up close to the genre, but Gideon Falls really just goes all in on the genre proper. Telling the story of a young man who thinks there's more to the city's trash than everyone else thinks, and a Catholic priest who make their way to a small town, Gideon Falls creates a mystery surrounding the Black Barn, and it's amazing. I was a fan when Lemire and Sorrentino worked together on Old Man Logan, so when this was announced I was already all in, and it just surpassed every expectation I could have had. It ran from 2018 to 2020 for 27 issues, and even though I finished it right when it ended this past December, it's next again on my reading list because it's just that good. Sorrentino's art is haunting, to say the least, and it's the type of story that when it was first being released, I was actively waiting for the next issue to drop, and now that it's over, I've never really stopped thinking about it. 3. Uzumaki, written and illustrated by Junji Ito. So technically Uzumaki is manga, but it's too good not to include on this list. If you're unfamiliar with Junji Ito, I both feel for you for not having been experiencing his work up until now, and also envious of you for getting to experience it for the first time, like I wish I could again. Uzumaki is arguably Ito's most well-known book, and it details a city that is under the hold of a curse that somehow ties into spirals. It sounds cliche, but you honestly, truly, genuinely will never look at spirals the same way after you read this book. The curse is honestly like no other I've ever seen in fiction, and the art details it in such a unique way. The art is simple, but in the best way possible. It would be a disservice to have it be any more realistic than it is, and it works seamlessly with the story in creating the kind of atmosphere that a lot of comics try and few actually succeed in constructing. Uzumaki was released in 3 volumes from 1998 to 1999, and is often cited as one of the best horror mangas there is. And just while I have you here, just read all of Junji Ito's work. He is a true horror craftsman, and H.P. Lovecraft's influence on his own work is very clear. He's built a universe all his own, and every corner of it is absolutely horrifying. I'm not personally, especially a big fan of manga, but there has not been a Junji Ito story yet that I haven't read and just loved. 2. 30 Days of Night by Steve Niles with art by Ben Templesmith. Now, I'm talking about the original 30 Days of Night here, the short series that ran for 3 issues from August to October 2002. There were a whole bunch of sequels that followed it, but this one here I'm talking about the very first. 30 Days of Night is the story of Barrow, Alaska, a town so far north that for 1 month out of every year, the sun doesn't rise. A town enveloped in a 30-day darkness makes for a perfect hunting ground for a band of truly unique vampires, and the book details the town fighting back against them. Ben Templesmith's art evokes, in my opinion, Dave McKean, who is a comic book legend, perhaps most known for his Sandman covers. Side note, I consider Sandman to be the best comic book series ever written. If you haven't read it, do yourself the favor. Templesmith's art is maybe best described as abstract. You can clearly see what's going on, but everything has this kind of inarticulate scratchiness to it that really lends to the terror the characters are going through. The sequels that follow it they're all good in their own rights, maybe some are better than others, but to me, none of them reach the claustrophobic horror that the original sets up. And number 1, Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth, by Grant Morrison with art by Dave McKean. So I am a huge Batman fan. I love all comics, but Batman is he's Batman. And Arkham Asylum is home to some of the greatest and most terrifying villains in all of comics. The book shows some of Batman's most well-known rogues in entirely different lights. It's not so much a superhero story as it is the deconstruction of the superhero story. It is remarkably dark, which says a lot when you're talking about Batman. It deals with some heavy subject matter and is, at least to me, the best display of psychological horror ever put on display on the pages of a comic book. Characters like the Joker, Mad Hatter, and Two-Face get unique twists on their established lore, as does Batman and his canon as a whole. And the art. I said it before about another book, but the art is just haunting. Images of the Joker in particularly will be burned into your memory, I promise. There are so many pages from this book that I can recall so vividly, more so than any other comic, horror or otherwise. When I said that Ben Templesmith's art in 30 Days of Night reminded me of Dave McKean, this is specifically the Dave McKean art that I'm talking about. Arkham Asylum was a genuinely groundbreaking book, and it is as celebrated today as it was when it first came out in October of 1989. So if you're an awesome person and are sticking around to see what I was talking about at the very, very beginning of this video, I appreciate it. I officially have a comic book on the way. Together with artist Taylor Tate, we created a book with a great story, if I do say so myself. And Taylor's artwork is fascinating and, to use my own word a third time, haunting. We've already created the first issue. It's been written, drawn, it's done. Completely finished. We're going to be launching a Kickstarter on June 1st for subsequent issues because there is a lot of story to tell and it costs money to make a comic book and we need the funds to tell that story. Taylor knows art, I know storytelling. We both know horror. If you decide you have a few bucks to spare when the time comes, we have some awesome rewards we'll be giving to people who donate. I'll be badgering you more as we near the date. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy some of these comics.